Welcome back to the Hill and Valley podcast. Today we're filming our Halloween special. I'm Joel. We're here with Adam and Rick. And today we're just going to talk about some of our favorite spooky things, what we think makes films or videos scary, or analyze some famous horror clips and things along those lines.
Yeah, we're trying to give our own input based on our video production experience as to what makes a movie either scary or not scary, certain elements of it, right?
Rick, what are some of your favorite scary movies, or just how do you feel about like the thriller or horror genre in general? Like, do you like being scared?
So I like being scared. Like I like going to haunted houses and stuff like that, and I think it's funny like to get scared. I enjoy it. I mean, obviously not in a bad way, but if it's meant to be scary, like a haunted house or a movie, like I enjoy it. I don't necessarily go out of my way to watch horror movies, but I have a lot of people in my life that do enjoy watching them, so I have seen a lot of them. I do like them when I am watching them, but I just usually don't. That's not the first genre I pick. But in terms of I'd say my favorite ones. I mean, I didn't even think about this at all beforehand.
That's all right.
Do you have any? What do you?
Oh no, I don't like scary things.
Oh, at all? Really?
I like spooky things. Like I'm into Halloween just aesthetically, and like spooky season is fun. And I'm into like metal music and a lot of like alternative culture stuff. So like I like things to be dark and spooky, but I have a really weak stomach and just like can't watch gore.
Yeah.
So like a lot of horror movies, as soon as someone gets murdered and it's just like really gory and gross, I'm like, I'm out. I'm not gonna enjoy this. So I like thriller movies a lot, especially like psychological thrillers. I think are really cool. Like
Yeah,
one that comes to mind is Nightcrawler. Isn't that what it's called?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Nightcrawler is my top 3 movies of all time. for
actually that's
sure.
one of my
Yeah.
favorite movies too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
I'd
that movie.
say I really like realistic scary movies, like
Mhm.
basically suspense or like mystery,
Yeah.
not necessarily like over the top, like Saw or anything like that.
Yeah.
But, sorry,
Well,
Brian.
that's one of our clips today.
Sorry, I know that Brian loves that.
But yeah, I love Nightcrawler, and for what you're talking about with like being suspenseful and like being a thriller, not necessarily like a horror movie that's like gory and stuff like that. I prefer those. But one of the movies I actually do like, I just thought of that is also one of my favorite movies. That is a horror movie. Is the Swedish movie called Let the Right One In, and that one is really good. It's pretty much like it's like a vampire movie, but it's just like it was filmed really well and the story's really cool. And I watched that in one of my classes when I went to Oswego, and I really enjoyed it. So.
Nice. We were talking about Nicolas Cage earlier today, but I just remembered when I was younger, I didn't really watch horror movies at all, and I still don't. But one movie that was probably like the scariest movie that I really liked was called Knowing. Did you guys ever see that?
I've heard of it, but
I've
I've
seen
never seen
Knowing,
it.
yeah.
It was like an alien thriller movie.
I kind of
with-
like those movies because that one, I mean, up until the end, it was somewhat realistic and like
Oh.
that.
The
I
end
felt like
sucked. The movie was ruined in the last 15 minutes. It was like, seriously? But the rest of the movie I think is awesome.
yeah. Well, I think just that whole, it's right in the title, like the whole knowing thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
when movies let you know something's wrong, but don't like expressly tell you, like you don't see the monster. Kind of like in Super 8.
Oh,
I really
yeah, Super
loved
8's
how
great.
the first half of the movie,
Yeah.
you never saw the monster, and that made it way scarier because you're like, is it an alien? Is it a werewolf?
That was kind of like also another movie like that is A Quiet Place, like how they wait for so long to show you what's actually happening. And
yeah,
then
it's like
that
normal
builds-
life,
yeah.
and then small things start to become off. And I like that
Yeah.
sort of, because that's like not just expressly scary for the sake of being scary. It's like mystery or like the
Yeah.
unknown.
Yeah. I think A Quiet Place is such a good shout as well. That was one of those movies that got a lot of praise and attention when it came out, and I think rightfully so, that like they were finding a new way to make a scary movie where it's just so quiet for so much of the movie, and that was like a really cool filmmaking choice, I thought, where throughout a lot of the movie, so much of your focus in terms of like audio was on the quiet ambient sounds. Like for like 5 or 10 minutes there would only be the crackle of a fire or like the wind blowing, and there's still action happening, but it's all in like sign language and subtitles and everything. And then the moment when someone like lets out a scream or something falls, it's like so much more intense.
It's a contrast.
Yeah, I thought that was one of the more creative scary movies I've ever seen. Not that I've seen that many, but
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
So you actually studied film and probably know a lot more than we do. Are there any things you've noticed in any of these like themes we've been talking about, a couple different movies, but like what in particular you think makes a film scary, authentically or well, kind of like editing or anything specific like that? Because we're just talking about how a lot of movies that are made to be scary end up almost kind of like cheesy. It's just like jump scares or like loud things that, you know, are expressly scary.
Yeah, so I don't really know where I'm going to go with this exactly, but I know what you're talking about. And so I guess there are certain movies that are just like scary because of what they are. Like, for example, like Predator, it would never happen. It's a fictional movie. And like, you know, even Super 8, like those movies are very, like they have monsters that are just outworld or otherworldly and just very, just like obviously not real and stuff like that. And even like, no, I don't know what I was going to say. Even Saw. But Saw Saw
theoretically could happen.
Could be actually realistic.
It's based in reality pretty much, right?
But yeah, like movies like that, I mean, those are scary because of like they make the monsters really scary and stuff like that. But then there are other movies that are, I feel like, a little bit more realistic where like there are actual people that like, you know, like serial killers or stuff like that that could actually happen. And like when we were talking before the podcast, one of the things I mentioned was about like the whole, like the shower scene in Psycho and stuff like that. And there's been movies where people have had like their babies, you know, stolen from a babysitter in the movie. And when those came out, you know, like in the 70s and 80s, like that created like a new thing for people to be afraid of. It was like, you know, before nobody was ever afraid to take a shower, or, you know, if they were, it was, you know, it was for their own reasons. It wasn't for like a reason that somebody's going to come in there and kill them or necessarily. But now with horror movies, like when things hit like really close to home like that, I feel like that's very scary because it's something that could actually happen to you. Whereas like the other movies with like Predator and movies that have like these monsters, like probably will never happen. I mean, you know, in our lifetime at least.
Right.
But the movies that are like, you know, have, you know, just everyday people like doing really scary and messed up things, I feel like those are especially scary. So
I feel like, you're much more likely to have a nightmare about a psycho killer after watching that movie rather than
exactly.
Oh, you know, I hope I don't go to a foreign planet and get eaten by an alien.
Although this is funny, but when I was a kid, one of my nightmares I had was after I watched Jurassic Park, that a velociraptor was going to come to my house and kill me and eat me. And
wow.
Yeah, that was
that's intense.
Yeah, but obviously it would never happen. But as a kid, I was very afraid of those movies.
Just to quickly piggyback off that, I actually had a nightmare last night. It was it was very, very far from all of this. But yeah, I woke up, I think it was like 3 a.m. or something, and my girlfriend said, "Hey." I said, "Hey." She was like, "You said you were talking to me." I was like, "No, I wasn't." She was like, "Oh, you must have been sleep talking." I was like, "Oh, well, like 10 seconds ago, I was in a dream where all these people that I like used to know kept just like appearing out of the corner of my eye and like staring at me and like telling me to wake up and like telling me that like I'm not real."
Whoa.
And it was only like in the dream,
gosh.
it was only like 10 or 15 seconds of that. But I feel like those are always the scariest dreams where like something is like off and like you're not really sure if you're in a dream or not, and then that kind of seamlessly transitions to you being awake. Like there's not like a hard cut ending. Sorry, random tangent, but I was thinking about this morning. I was like, that was one of the weirder nightmares I've ever had. And whenever I do have nightmares, they're usually not, like you said.
Yeah.
Or you said, like going to an alien planet or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's like a real thing that I've thought about, or just like some like supernatural combination of real experiences I've had that are haunting or weird.
Yeah.
Did you ever end up waking up?
Did I?
Oh my God.
I think so. I went back to sleep. I made it to work today, so.
Nice. So you want to dive into some of these scenes we're going to take a look at and analyze a couple of these different movies and what particular makes them scary. All right, so Brian has selected a few different scary films for us to watch a portion of, specific scenes. So we're going to take a look and analyze what's going on and why they're scary.
Whoa.
All right, so the opening of Saw, what did you guys think here? What made you
I immediately noticed a lot of your kind of typical scary filmmaking techniques, but I didn't think that they were overdone or like done to the point where it was cheesy. Some of those being like the use of sound design where there's lots of noises and then there's no noise. And then it makes, like what we were talking about with A Quiet Place, the contrast between like loud and quiet can often be either jarring or suspenseful, like especially when the guy was like struggling to get out of the bathtub, and then once he was up and walking around, you would hear him talking and like yelling for help, but there was like no other noise. Mm-hmm. So I felt like that was something I've seen before, but was done well. The other thing that I thought was kind of cool was the sort of POV shot kind of thing, where once the lights came on, obviously we started by seeing his reaction, where his eyes were closed, he was like blinded by the lights, and then the next shots were from his perspective, looking up at the lights with like that kind of blurry effect on it.
Yeah, for how long of a scene it was really like not a lot of shots. I noticed there was like a couple insert shots that really like showed you like the drain specifically. That was cool with the sound design.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the scariest shot of the whole video for me. But the fact that they kind of just kept it as that one take helps you feel like sit with it a little bit longer and believe that you're in this environment.
Yeah.
Especially if it was done today. I think with like modern camera techniques, the one thing that didn't make it as scary to me was the fact that it was just like the distance between you and the subject. It felt very like impersonal, and I just didn't really feel any emotion from it. Like I felt like if it was like closer up with like a wide angle lens, I would have felt more like I was there with him, or I feel like that's how it would be done now, right?
Yeah,
Like
I think you're right.
Wide angle lens looking around a lot. That was just kind of like almost a static shot, just watching him, which
I actually haven't seen Saw, so I think I understand the plot of it roughly, but isn't part of it where they are being watched, where it's this guy basically torturing people in a room. I don't know if he has like cameras or something, but that's something that was maybe an intentional choice, is like you're watching the spectacle of this person suffering and struggling and being tortured.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
maybe that far away camera angle was a choice.
I agree. I feel like I've seen it done more intentional, where it's like the security camera or like the watching, the whatever you want to call it, the gaze of somebody watching them.
Mm-hmm.
But for that specific example, it just felt, like I said, impersonal. I was just like, and sometimes it's meant to feel impersonal, but in that instance, I feel like it could have benefited from being more personal, because you would have been like, wow, I'm terrified,
Yeah.
But that's just my thought. Rick, what did you think?
One thing I noticed, I like paying attention to the very beginning of movies. There's always like really interesting things that happen at the beginning to either like set the scene or help you figure out what's going on. And the one thing I noticed is right away you hear the sound of water, but it's underwater, and a lot of people are naturally afraid of water, especially drowning and stuff like that. So when it opens up with an underwater sound, and then you realize there's a guy underwater, you automatically get a little like. In a lot of movies, when people see people underwater, it's very intense, it's very nerve-wracking, because you think about drowning, you think about like holding your breath. So immediately you're already like, okay, this is intense. There's somebody underwater. We hear not only the noise of water, but being underwater. And I think everybody kind of knows that sound at this point. So when you hear that right away, you already like the intensity already like gets kicked up. It's not like a slow fade, and it's like immediately like you feel like you're almost underwater. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it was also a very dark scene, like in the beginning. I like that it was super low key and moody.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't see really what was going on. That made it a lot more scary until the lights came on.
Well, that's another kind of filmmaking technique I feel like I see with a lot of scary movies, is to have your shot be so tight on something that you can't tell where you are or really even what you're looking at. And part of it's like bright out and there was a glare. I couldn't really see what was happening in the first few shots. But like you said, it was dark and moody, and like I recognized partially from the visuals, but also from the audio, that we were underwater. But for the first like 4 or 5 shots, I didn't put it together that it was a bathtub. And so the kind of reveal of him coming out of the bathtub, like even with the drain, like when I saw the drain, I still didn't know that was a tub necessarily. So I thought that was like a clever thing to do, to kind of start the movie out with a little bit of confusion along with the suspense of being underwater, and then kind of have that snap out of it moment.
For sure. I feel like the insert shots did a lot for me too. Like there were very few of them, and they all felt like the scariest moments. Like they told you a lot of information, and it was just like the drain, the gun, the dead guy, and the guy's hand or whatever. And like they just felt very intentional, and like I kind of like that sort of storytelling.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the drain was probably the scariest shot for me. You're kind of just like sitting there staring at it, like wondering what it's about. And
did we see what the thing that went down the drain was? Was it a necklace?
So the thing with Saw is this is kind of not really like a horror movie thing, but like just a movie thing. Everything in this beginning scene is vitally important to the movie. Like
Okay.
the drain, the tub, the lights, the room, the man in the middle, the gun, the tape, everything like comes back at multiple points throughout the movie. And so it's like, it's all these things that you're like, oh, this is a weird ass room, like we don't know anything, but then everything comes back to the ending. So it's kind of like
that's cool. That almost reminds me of like a murder mystery style of
Yeah, it's a
storytelling
puzzle.
where it's like, here's the scenario, you don't know what it is yet, but here's all the pieces, and you might not know what's important yet. But yeah, I love movies that unfold like that. Maybe I should watch Saw.
All right, let's see.
Cool.
You want to dive into the next one, or do you want to talk about anything else?
I think we're good. Yeah, we can
Yeah,
go
let's
next
move
one.
on.
So now we are watching the ending, one of the ending scenes in the Blair Witch Project.
That was it. Dang.
Well, I don't know. I found that to be much scarier than the Saw one, even though the Saw give you a lot more expressly scary information. Guy's head blown off, gun, the drain, the drowning. For me, it's like the suspense of not knowing in that clip where you're following, like, you can't look away, like you're looking around corners, even though half the time you're looking at nothing, just hearing that person scream.
Yeah, I mean, I think it did a kind of similar thing to the beginning of Saw, where there's silence and screaming, which just that constant contrast is, I think, naturally suspenseful and intense. And I'd agree with you where this is a bit more like can't look away, because like the reason this shot or this scene is in the movie is because you're seeing nothing. Eventually you're going to see something,
Yes.
and so you're glued to the screen.
It's
You're
the
like, what am I
unknown.
going to find out? Yeah. That being said, I feel like that's what I was thinking the whole time. It was just like, all right, it's going to be a whole lot of nothing, and then something's going to jump out, or I'm going to see somebody creepy in the corner of the room, which is exactly what happened. So to me, it's like a little bit predictable, which whenever I see something, be like, all right, I know where they're going with this, that takes me out of it a lot personally. But yeah, I think visually this did like capture my attention a bit more than the first one.
Which is interesting because visually there's nothing going on most of the time. It's literally just walls, and like the Saw one was so precise with the cinematography. Like, this is what's going to be scary for you. This is another piece of the puzzle. Like Brian said, they were little pieces.
And I think, like, I mean, obviously this movie was very important for filmmaking in terms of like how it was filmed. And I think that speaks to a lot of like how we felt like this was a lot scarier than the Saw clip, because you almost feel like you're the one recording the camera. Like, you're literally looking through the viewfinder, and you and the person filming are going to see something jump out both at the same time. It's not like, a lot of other movies where, like, you see the character, like, off screen, or like you see the character, through the lens instead of like seeing with the character, I feel like. So that was what it was really scary, because you're like, we're both experiencing this for the first time. Like, that's what it kind of felt like. And like, you almost feel like you're like holding the camera too, and you're like going around the corner, and it's like just very like, cause when other movies are filmed, like, I feel like there's a lot of like, there's wider shots. You get the idea of what's happening in the scene, but with this, you don't have that. You literally are just like at the hands of like the character just going around with the camera, and there's no like, you don't get to see him and the camera. You are only seeing through the lens of the camera, which I think is like especially scary. And like, even though I knew like what Joel was saying, I knew like something was going to eventually pop out. It's still very scary. And I feel like what Adam was saying with, just hearing the girl scream every once in a while, and there'd be like pretty much no other noise but that, is just a very eerie like feeling too.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that though, because like so many other people have tried to do this technique with films. Like the one that always comes to mind is Cloverfield, and it was, to me, that just wasn't scary at all. It was just like silly almost,
That,
I haven't seen
I agree.
Cloverfield.
I've seen that one, and
I don't know if it's just the circumstance, because like witches are maybe a little bit more, or like being lost in the woods and not knowing what's out there with the camera is maybe a little bit more realistic to me than the alien invasion thing.
Because I do agree with you though, because I saw that and I liked it, but I definitely thought it was a little like, it was a lot. I feel like this did a better job of making you scared than that entire movie basically, but I don't know how to describe it exactly, but I know what you're talking about.
Rick, can you elaborate a little bit on like how this movie was filmed? You were saying that this movie was kind of big for filmmaking. I haven't seen the whole movie. Is the entire thing shot like through a camcorder?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen it either.
Oh, okay.
But I just know that this is one of those movies that was like,
Yeah, it's like a found footage.
Yeah, found
documentary.
footage. Yeah,
like
that's
somebody
that's the
filmed
word, yeah.
this. Somebody filmed this themselves, and the characters are experiencing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can watch some more things, but I'm inclined to transition to Blue Hour.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
mean,
right.
We can dive right into it. Yeah, I think it's a good time.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good transition. So we worked on a film last year called Blue Hour. That is out right now, or is it still in festivals?
It's
No,
out. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
It's on Amazon.
Sweet. And it has some similarities to this kind of thing where the story follows these two people who are making a documentary and are searching for one of their lost fathers. And so part of the movie is seeing these characters filming their documentary, and then the other part of the movie is the documentary itself. And I thought that was a cool format to play with, where it's not entirely everything we're seeing is through the camera that the characters are holding. This is cool because you like sometimes weren't really sure which one you were in. But yeah, what was your guys' favorite part about that experience, or how do you feel Blue Hour was successfully scary, or like how would you rate that style of filmmaking and how it came off in the final product?
Yeah, I would say I was very happy with the way Blue Hour turned out, especially considering, being there and filming it, and when you're standing there, you're like, oh, this isn't that scary. But then when you watch it back, it's like all the things that are excluded from the frame makes it even scarier, because that's the scary part about it, is like, even though this circumstance might not be particularly believable, what's happening to the person in the film is believable. So I think that was probably the scariest part for me. It's just not knowing what's going to happen next. And I think how it differs from something like the Blair Witch Project or any of the other found footage pieces we've been watching is just like the structure that is provided. I feel like there's a lot of story structure in Blue Hour, and I can really appreciate that, because I feel like the more you follow along the story, the more you believe you're there, opposed to like something that's just, I mean, this is still wildly successful, having little to no structure, supposedly. Just kind of like the film kind of just roams. Obviously, there's still a script and everything.
Yeah.
But I think the lack of a script can also be beneficial, or not lack of a script, but lack of a specific plot line.
Yeah, and I think that also what you're talking about with Blue Hour's story structure, you could see this as a good thing or a bad thing, but to me, I think it's in general a good thing. Makes it more accessible and like more digestible. So like when you're watching the movie, it has dates of like, all right, the movie starts at a certain time period, and then you kind of understand what the story is going to be about, and then a few months go by and they are at a different point in their process of making the documentary and researching and trying to find answers. I feel like it feels a little bit more like an adventure, even though it's like not.
I love
really
that about it though,
Yeah.
because something like this Blair Witch Project here, it's like less digestible. It's really hard to watch, and that's part of what makes it scary. But also, if less people watch it, then it's going to have less of an impact on people.
Yeah.
But with something like Blue Hour, it was very digestible, and like there was at times parts where you're just getting information and learning about the film, opposed to just like looking around all the time,
Right. It would build up to the scary moments, and kind of bounce around between those scary pinnacle moments and, like you said, moments where we're just getting information, learning more about the characters, understanding where we are, or understanding what the characters' goals are. I felt like it was a little bit more well-rounded and balanced than maybe something like Blair Witch Project. But again, I haven't seen the full movie. Just my opinion.
Yeah. One thing I'll say, I definitely liked the scenes where they had the cameras like attached to themselves. I thought that was a really cool angle. It's kind of like a Dutch angle. It's kind of like really low down and like kind of like crooked almost. It wasn't like a perfect like straight on shot of them. And I thought that kind of helped the movie. It was kind of like when you see an angle like that, I feel like when you like that, usually like in a lot of movies I've seen, when you see camera angles like that, you think something a little like, I guess you could say, like scary is going to happen, or like kind of like something off-putting. And like I feel like in the movie, every time they had their cameras on like that, the character was always like doing something that they were like really afraid of, like whether they're in the woods or they're just trying to document where they were, like when they went to that the other dimension and stuff like that. I thought that was really interesting, and I thought that was just like really cool, and like that made it like for me, that was what made the movie scary, was like those scenes where the camera was like it was kind of like that with like the wide lens, but it was like really close to them, so it felt like really intense and felt like really scary. So that's like that's what I took away from that.
On top of that, correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't there some scenes in the movie where we were seeing that like GoPro angle, where they were out in the woods looking for something and they ended up not finding anything?
Yeah.
So that's something that I like, going back to Blair Witch Project, where we're watching suspensefully through this camcorder footage. It's like, all right, like they're about to find something. Like we're looking at a whole lot of nothing, but it's very suspenseful and they're screaming. We know there's something.
Yeah, it doesn't have to try very hard to be scary.
Yeah, and so I like that even when we're watching through the crooked Dutch angle wide lens that's kind of omitting a lot from the frame, instead of it necessarily leading up to something scary happening, it conveys to us that the character who's wearing that camera is nervous and anxious about something scary that might happen. And so I really liked in the script of that movie that there were times where the feeling was ominous and scary, but nothing bad necessarily happened, because then it made it those other times when it was ominous and scary, the same situation you'd seen before, when something bad did happen, it was a lot more surprising and less predictable.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like that.
I can really appreciate how this story doesn't rely on fear the whole time. Like, I feel like for me, that's a much more enjoyable film watching experience. And, like, I'd watch it more times rather than, like, I feel like if you watch something like that's just POV the entire time, you kind of watch it once and it starts to lose its effect on you.
Yeah.
You said it multiple times, but I just want to know what your thoughts and opinions are on the Dutch angle. Do you think that adds or takes away to the movie experience when you saw Dutch angle?
I think I mostly dislike the Dutch angle. I feel like it doesn't, I mean, yeah, it's like a forced way of being like, this should be scary, you know?
Yeah.
To me, I feel like if it's used in a like intentionally dramatic way, which like obviously in all filmmaking, most decisions are intentional, you know? But if it's like, all right, here's the scary moment, take the camera and put it like this. Everything's at an angle, you're like off balance, like.
Or the camera fell, you know, and now it's crooked.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say sometimes I think that does work. It's a fine line, but like.
They did it in Super 8, but they took it to the next level because I think the lens cracks in front of you or something like that.
Yeah, well, something that's like, it has to make sense within the story of the movie and just like the style of the movie. But when the camera itself can also be a character in the scene, I enjoy that. Maybe that's just me as like a filmmaker. I'm like, oh, that's neat that like they have a non-person character in the scene, which I think is cool. Like when the camera movement or lack thereof, or like if the camera falls and breaks, or like someone bumps the camera or something, like little touches like that I think are cool. Like I've seen that in some action scenes where like someone's running by and like the camera gets bumped and that's part of the shot, you know? I think that can be cool, but I'm less into just the intentional, like, all right, next shot and it's crooked.
Yeah, I feel like that starts to fall on its face because it's like, again, almost obvious that like you're watching a movie and they're trying to make you feel like you're not watching a movie. And I really like Wes Anderson's approach to filmmaking, where it's like you are watching a movie and this is the story you're watching. It's like flipping through a storybook and you know, it's more of an enjoyable experience and less of a like trying to like shroud you in mystery. And
yeah, I think every movie's different with that though. Like you said, Wes Anderson movies are not necessarily trying to make you feel like you're there, but some movies that is the intention. And there's different levels of success with that. Some like are on that line where you're like, yeah, I get that it's immersive, and then something happens that completely takes you out of it. But that's also an experience I really enjoy, is when you're like completely caught up in this world in the movie you're watching, and not constantly thinking about like, oh yeah, I'm watching this film, I wonder what's going to happen next. Like I really like to be immersed in things. That's why I really like fantasy and like some sci-fi stuff, things that are like otherworldly, that make me really curious and interested about learning more about what's in this world, and not think about myself sitting on a couch watching a film.
That's a good point. Oh, you guys want to watch the beginning of Fear Street?
I've never
so
seen
good.
it. Yeah, let's do that.
The storyline in Fear Street's a little questionable.
Did you like it?
But I thought the scary element of it was pretty spot on, and for a couple different reasons we can talk about.
I'm saying like the whole movie though. Did you like the whole movie or?
It's a 3 parts.
Yeah, I watched 2 out of 3 of them.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay.
And it's one that I particularly like. You would think I wouldn't like it because of all the reasons I just said. Like, it is really unrealistic and like pretty forced scariness. But the fact that they didn't have to drop the ball on the cinematography is why I like it.
You're saying the cinematography makes up for?
Yeah, they weren't like, you know, sacrificing like, oh, you know, this is a scary movie, so it doesn't have to be filmed well. It's just like, you know, sometimes I feel like this.
Yeah, I get that for sure.
But the thing that did struggle in this one is like the dialogue is really bad. All right, let's watch it. What'd you guys think?
It was visually really interesting. Like you said, like cinematography was good. There were definitely a lot of those other things that you said where it's like
Super contrived and like,
yeah,
this is what a scary movie is.
exactly. It's like the high pitched violins whenever there's a noise off screen.
Yeah.
Like
But like the production value is pretty unreal.
yeah, it looks amazing.
And to
there were
me,
some cool
when a movie
choices.
looks that good, I'm never like, oh, this is just a scary movie. Like, there's something to be said about like just all the choices they made there.
Yeah, and also like I'll watch a beautiful bad movie for sure. Like if it's really well shot and designed, but like the script sucks, I'll still watch it. I like looking at pretty things, and like if a movie's done really well, I'll enjoy it.
This film also generally has a really good like storyline, which is kind of like believable. It's very Netflixy and like just kind of simple, but it helps ground the whole story too. It's like the town is cursed or something, and they keep coming across like every however many years the like curse comes back.
That's like, isn't that like it though? That's like how they do that with like the thing. It only comes back every like 30 years or something. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I want to say those films are like in collaboration with Stephen King or something.
Oh yeah.
But just even in that, like, this is like a great example because again, it's all of the things you'd expect from a scary movie, but the image quality, the lighting, the lensing are things that like I feel like other scary movies never pay attention to.
Yeah, I agree. And to be fair, most horror films have so much less of a budget than action films, like dramas, like all the other big ticket movies. Because like horror is it's not as popular of a genre as a lot of other things. I feel like it has a really diehard following, but like people have just gotten used to horror movies being bad, but they still like them. So
well,
I agree.
high school project, you're like, oh, I'm gonna make a horror movie about somebody chasing me down the school hallway, and it's just like easy. It's like almost easy to do.
We'll get to that,
right? Because it's become known.
Yeah.
Become to be known as like you don't need a lot of production value. You can just make something scary if it's scary enough.
Well, also, I mean, one of the scary things that I thought about was, imagine being in a mall alone when there's nobody there. I mean, usually most of the time malls are filled with people, hundreds of people. And then to see this one girl closing the gate, which the mall's closing, it's dark in there. Like that's scary in itself. Like forget monsters or anything. I mean, I would be scared like in a huge mall by yourself closing up. That's very scary. And on top of that, like, where there's books, I mean, she's in a bookstore. I mean, that's, and you hear one book fall. I mean, I don't know. But yeah, I just thought the fact that it being in, a huge empty mall was already really scary to me. And that's kind of what like brought me right into the
production
story.
value too, like the location, that's pretty crazy. And I feel like what the Fear Street series does good as a whole is not leaving a lot of like gaps for the story. Like I feel like the story is pretty dialed. I know you haven't watched them, but
yeah, it's just
there's not
one scene I saw.
Like even in Stranger Things, I find myself going like, all right, well that doesn't make sense compared to what happened last time. Like why don't they just do this? Like that's what they did last time, Where like in this one, I feel like there's a lot less plot gaps they're like really realistic about it instead of like trying to stretch the story so much.
So. Yeah, I'll have to check it out because that was like, I don't know, does it get super gory and contrived? Okay, cool.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, there's definitely some gory scenes. They were never like they don't like hold on it and like make you watch it, like that type of gory. It's more of just like people losing their arm and then running around or something. So
fun.
It's still pretty crazy. I mean, but yeah, it's beautiful. It's great to watch. And for me, if a scary movie is scary, that's fine. But like if it's a good story or nice to watch, then it's like that's the main goal for me.
Yeah, the scary movies that I've watched that I've enjoyed have been movies where them being scary wasn't the only thing going for
That's
it.
what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Like if it's a really, like we were kind of talking about with Blue Hour, if it feels like an adventure movie where I'm like uncovering a mystery, like if I'm constantly learning things about the story throughout the movie, if there's scary moments or if even the main story itself is kind of spooky and scary, or like the climax of the movie is scary, whatever, as long as it's like a good story and has all those other things we were talking about, like production value and good lighting and cinematography. And that was something just about this scene we just watched. I think my favorite part about it was, again, with the production value, when she left the bookstore and was running across the mall. I think it was only one wide shot just of the mall where she was pretty small in frame running through it. We saw some other stores on the side. We saw some other stores like on the side of the frame. And like you were saying, that gave us a really good sense of setting and space of like, oh yeah, even without somebody in a costume chasing you with a knife, that's a kind of scary spot.
The
and then where
lighting
she
in that
lands,
store that's closed, that's all blue.
well, yeah, the store she passed by was cool. And then when she ends up in the costume shop or whatever it is, I love that they lit it with a black light. Because it's like, okay, that's actually a place where a black light would make sense. If you were anywhere else, like black light is a very unique look and you can recognize it like immediately. So if it was anywhere besides like a nightclub or a costume shop, like a place that's supposed to be scary, it wouldn't make sense. But it was like a really interesting and like beautiful visual choice to make that they made work within the production.
Yeah, I feel like they really dotted their I's and crossed their T's, which for me is what made it a better film or better series, because like you said, it is scary inherently because it's the circumstance, but because the film's done so well, you're never like thinking about it being a movie or a show.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen Ritual?
Never
I don't think so.
That's
no.
the one movie that I saw that was like scary for scary's sake, that I was actually like, this is kind of a good movie and really scary. It was really unrealistic, but it was, I guess because it was such a foreign concept to me, it was kind of terrifying. You should watch it.
One of the movies that I watched when I was younger, that actually scared me a lot, and it was one of the like big ones that was in theaters that I think most people thought were scary, but now as I'm older and make films myself, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of lame. Paranormal Activity 3.
Nice.
I remember I watched that movie in
I
theaters.
thought the movie's hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. But I was in theaters and like 13 and like with my middle school girlfriend or whatever, and like every single jump scare got me.
Body flying around.
Yeah,
the room.
exactly. And the whole room is just like silence and then everyone going which is a fun experience in itself. But
do you guys see Dark on Netflix?
I started watching it, but I never finished it.
Oh, great
but,
series. Yeah. Another one that's like being scary is like their last priority, I think. But it makes it more scary.
That's cool.
Yeah, just inherently. But yeah, Ritual, check it out.
Nice. I'll have to give that one a watch.
Sure.
It's like a Nordic pagan like ritual
I have heard of
into
that.
demon thing. But you don't know it's this like demon movie. Like you don't see the demon thing until like, I want to say like 40% of the movie. You like get your first little glimpse. Just hints along the way.
That's cool. We don't make a lot of scary films, but having experience watching things that make us feel scared or learning what makes people feel a certain way with video, with any emotion, is valuable. But do we have any examples or things that we've learned from all these influences and movies that we've watched that we've been able to incorporate into our work as of late?
Yeah, I think the ad we made for the escape room, we had to do a little bit of that. I mean, it was definitely much more of a commercial, but we were like, how do we express to people what it feels like to be locked in this room, you know? And so we took an angle of mystery because we really wanted to kind of captivate the audience and make them feel like when you're in there, you know, you're figuring out this puzzle, and it is very mysterious. But making it even more of a mystery in the commercial, I feel like brings the viewer's attention and will make more people interested in it.
Yeah. Well, I thought that was a really interesting problem to have, or like challenge to have, where it's like, all right, we need to film a commercial of these escape rooms and show, like, start telling the story of what each of these rooms are and make people want to follow along, but we can't spoil any of it. So that was just like a interesting challenge as we were going through like pre-producing, going through the shot list. We're like, all right, what puzzles can we show but not show the answers to, or like what should we not include so that someone doesn't get the hint, like, oh, maybe there's a clue there. But we talked to the client, the guy who owns the escape room, and he was pretty good about helping us out with that. But yeah, that was a really fun project, because like you said, we took the angle of, instead of making a fun, cheesy ad, which most of the other escape room ads that we had ever seen were like, we took the angle of like, let's make these commercials feel like trailers for a mystery movie. And I thought just that choice that we made the whole project a lot more fun for me, because it was like, all right, how do I make this essentially like 30-second or 1 minute long short film that's also a commercial for this ad,
Yeah, that was a fun.
or commercial for this escape room.
That was a fun challenge.
Yeah.
I think we must have done all right, because I went and did one of the escape rooms and I still had no idea how to do it. So everyone's like, "Oh, you're cheating, huh? You know how to do it?" I'm like, "I have no clue. I'm useless here." So
Nice. What were so Rick, I forget, did you film on that? Did you film that project at all?
No,
Did you come in
for the house?
Yeah.
Yeah, I helped a little bit. I
Okay.
didn't necessarily film much. I like filmed a tiny bit maybe, but yeah, I was pretty like removed from that.
Okay. Well, I'm curious then, like, what's your feedback on like having seen it without necessarily being a part of as many of the decisions on set of like, all right, let's light this a certain way, let's shoot this a certain way. Like, after seeing the final videos, what did you think about how it made you feel, or what the like production elements that we utilized, like what those kind of accomplished for the feeling of the film?
Yeah, I thought that especially. I liked that, like how much pre-production went into it, where, you know, your biggest goal was to show how interesting the rooms were, but not give anything away, like clues towards the room. And one of the shots that I remember from those videos that I liked a lot was the guy taking the blindfold off and then him being handcuffed. And it's like, that's crazy, you know, for like an escape room to be blindfolded and handcuffed. And like, that's not giving anything away, but it's making me think like, I want to do that. That's crazy, because that's like a very interesting challenge. And then, like, you know, the way that, you know, you guys showed the rooms and like the way you guys lit everything, it like made the rooms look really interesting and scary and like, you know, challenging, but not in a way where you see something, you're like, oh, well, I can just pause the video and figure out how to do this. It was very, I felt very removed from that. I just thought that you did a really good job showing like the puzzles themselves, but nothing like of how to get to the puzzle or even to complete the puzzle. And I thought that was really cool. But yeah, I mean, just the whole, I mean, even like set design, like the lighting and just like having everything, you know, set up the way it was. I just thought it made all the rooms like just super interesting. Like made me want to like go there and like try like pretty much every room. So
yeah, the rooms had a lot of production value to begin with. So like the little, once we found our little like vibe, like adding in our lighting and stuff, it really helped to elevate like what the experience was in the room. Because like we wanted the experience on the film to be pretty true to life, but just kind of elevating it. And I think doing the lighting, and also you did a really good job directing the talent so that the talent felt really involved. Like maybe even we would select parts of the room that maybe were less important, but we're like, oh, this is visually really cinematic and there's a lot of movement. My favorite shot is like with the lasers where the girls were looking around with the flashlight and the
that's really
smoke.
cool.
Like
That's
probably
shot
not
of the
that
whole
big of
thing.
a moment in the actual escape room. You've done that one, but
yeah.
Yeah, but there's lasers in a room with fog in it. It looks awesome.
Who doesn't want to check that out? Yeah.
Yeah, and like I feel like a lot of like, you know, like companies do this with like, I mean, I always go back to this, but I always think of like fast food companies with like photos and videos. Like they make their food and products look better than they actually are. And I feel like what we do a really good job of is showcasing how good the products and how cool they are, but not like making them look unrealistic. Like I felt with the escape rooms, like when you watch it and then you go there, you're not disappointed. If anything, you're like more excited because like, oh my God, I saw that in the movie. Like I'm so excited or I saw that in the ad. I'm so excited to get to this point. But it felt like very true to life, but like Adam said, just elevated. It didn't feel like it was unrealistic. It just felt elevated to me, which I liked.
Well, you touched on this, but Eric at the escape room did so much of the work for us just by designing and building these rooms. Like we were talking to him about how much effort and like intention and like fine details.
I mean, it took him 2
rooms.
years to build those.
I know, and
that's
not
crazy.
only just like the complexity of the puzzles, but like you walk in and it's a movie set already.
Yeah,
like
literally.
every little detail, the wallpaper, the
Props.
fake windows on the wall with like flickering lights behind them. There was already so many things that like if it didn't have, we would maybe think to try and do ourselves. Like, all right, what if we can like put up a window frame here? Like, what can we add to the scene? Every room was like already perfect for that. So basically, the only production stuff that we did, I feel like, was not the only, but the biggest production thing that we did was just lighting and like looking at each room, saying what's the vibe of this room, what colors are already here. We used a lot of colored lights, just to add like ambience into the room to make it feel more like a produced like fantasy or adventure movie rather than just like a room that has a lot of decoration.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time with Eric too, of him like walking us through the rooms where he would show us his favorite parts, but then we would like kind of wait for him to show us the rest of the room, and there'd usually be a part that you and I liked better that was like but this looks cool. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
if this is important to the room or not. Like, people are gonna love seeing this.
Yeah, and seeing his reaction to that was also really funny. He'd be
Yeah,
like,
he's
really?
like-
Like, okay, that's just a notebook. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing special about that. I was like, whatever.
Looks good.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you want to introduce this segment?
Oh, yeah, sure.
That's the
So while we're on the topic of spooky things and horror movies and video production, it came to mind, it reminded me that my senior year of high school, I was in a small video art class with just 8 people. And the teacher was great. He was very chill, didn't care too much what we did. We just like made a bunch of BS. Like it was, I don't know. Most of my films are jokes. This was the one that wasn't, but I think we'll get a good laugh out of it. We all had to make a horror film of some sort. And this is the one where I took it kind of seriously and all of my classmates made that traditional, like, yeah, exactly, like typical cheesy horror film. So while this might not be as
swinging.
typical and cheesy, it's certainly cringy, but we're going to take a look. Also, I didn't know how video files worked, so I didn't know how to export. So this is in, what is it, PAL or whatever? the thing that, like, the format that's for, like, old TV. So, like, it's all
4x? Oh, it's interlaced.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the one.
That's
So-
going to make it scarier.
Oh, yeah. It was intentional.
Yeah, it was a creative decision. Whoa. It's getting loud.
There's not much audio.
It was zipper shot.
There it was.
Nice. Great work, Joel.
Nice.
Thank you.
I like to. It's like some. There's. I might be the interlacing you were talking about, but it looked like there was some weird like shutter angle thing happening when you were walking down the hall. It was like glitchy.
Oh, yeah. All motion in that was super, like, jittery and terrible. I assume that was probably a in-camera error. And not
An
just
homage
export.
to Blair Witch.
Yeah, totally.
One thing I'll say, this is actually good because this reminds me of a class that I took at Oswego. It was motion picture editing.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that class, we were given all of us were given the same footage,
Mm-hmm.
and we had to edit it like how we thought it should be edited. And everybody did it similarly. You know, obviously you're going through and it's kind of almost getting boring. You're like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then one kid made it a sitcom. It's supposed to be a horror movie. He made it. It was one of the funniest things I have ever seen because, like, when you turn something scary into something funny, you realize how much sound design and music goes into horror movies. Because, like, this reminded me of that because there's like that really high pitched noise you put in, the very eerie music.
Mm-hmm.
But all I could think about, I'm like, imagine there's like sitcom music behind this and there's a laugh track. Like, it would be a lot funnier and you could immediately make it funny. So
Wow.
when I was in that class, all of us were dying because this kid edited. He did it such a good job. Where like they were saying serious dialogue, but he put a laugh track behind it and sitcom like music, and it was the funniest thing I've ever seen.
That's
And it just
awesome.
goes to show like how important editing is in any kind of movie, but it's like how different you can make like something feel just based on editing and sound design and like stuff like that. I thought it was so funny. So that the music you chose can definitely like maybe like think of that. So
Yeah, well, there's no audio in the entire thing. It was just static and
Screams.
a high-pitched noise.
Yeah.
There weren't actually any screams. If you notice, I wasn't recording audio for the entire thing. It was just I would raise the volume of the static whenever she would scream.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was literally just like 3 sound effects from some free website that I probably installed viruses onto my school's computers
Oh
with.
my god.
But yeah, Rick, isn't there a name for that? Like the order you edit things in that can have different effects. Like,
Is that called the Kuleshov effect? Is that what it is? Yeah. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
The Kuleshov effect. Yeah. Yeah. That was another thing and when you're doing editing, that's like one of the things they always show us is like a sequence of editing, like how different you can make a scene feel just based on editing different clips together. So
what's it called? Battleship Potemkin or whatever?
Yeah, Battleship Potemkin is there's a scene on what's called the Odessa Steps where there's like a big fight scene in it. That's a really good scene for like in terms of editing, just showing like the fight scene and like how like intense it was and stuff like that. And I don't remember exactly that scene, but basically it has to just do with editing and making, how it can make or break a movie, kind of.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I feel like that looking at the films we watched today, especially like the Saw one, because it was like such specific in and out points. Like if you reordered that, it could have a very different effect.
Yeah, exactly.
As to what it would achieve.
Yeah, even with the same like length of clip, like if you basically just took the export of that and then just rearranged it, I feel like it could be very different, or just like really bad if you didn't time it out well.
Yeah, that's why editing's so important. I think editing is one of the most important parts for a lot of these scary films, because it's like the series of events. Like the more intricate and the more intentional it is, like what you're showing somebody and when and for how long, the like more impactful it'll be.
That was something I thought about earlier, but I don't think I said, where an editing or just like filmmaking technique with scary movies that I feel like works on me as a viewer quite a lot is like the overly long shot. Like a shot where you're just holding something and maybe nothing's happening for like 5 seconds and then something else small happens, but it's just building suspense of just like you're refusing to look away from this one thing. Like I feel like really long shots, especially like static shots or shots that aren't moving a lot or aren't changing, just because we're so used to action happening in movies, when something is just like frozen, and especially if it's with a character or someone where we're like relating to, I feel like that's something that adds a lot of suspense, which again could easily be changed or like ruined with editing. If like the filmmaker films it and is like, all right, we're holding the shot for a minute and a half, and then the editor is just like, yeah, these 3 seconds look good.
Yeah.
Like it can totally get lost in translation and have a completely different effect.
Absolutely. I agree with that. All right, well, thanks for watching our very spooky episode. I hope you guys got something out of this or learned something. We still don't have a name for the podcast, so if you guys have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments and let us know what else we should talk about. You guys want to see a Thanksgiving themed podcast?
We'll try our hardest to look for Thanksgiving movies.
I don't know about that.
We're just going to watch, what's the Pilgrim movie?
Scott Pilgrim?
No.
Are you sure?
We should have a Thanksgiving party where we just watch Scott Pilgrim all dressed up as Pilgrim.
I don't think these guys are getting it. But yeah, if you guys want to see more content that's involved us talking about movies or other aspects of cinema, not just Hill and Valley, we'd love to do that. I think this was a fun episode for us. So thanks for checking it out, and we'll catch you in the next episode.